Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Dragonus Podcastus. I'm your host, Dead Ponic. If you want to support us on our Patreon or my Fiverr page, you can do so. And if you support us on our Patreon, you'll get access to our Discord, which will include eventually bloopers and our bingo card, which I still haven't made for some reason. I really have to get on with that. Lady Maeve, tell them about your Start Playing page and that coupon you sent me.
Yes, welcome listeners. I run Dungeons and Dragons games for ages 18 and up, which would be the adult level players, on a website called Start Play. You can request games with me. You can join in games that are already running. I also run games for children ages 7 to up to 18 on a program called OutSchool, which is a website that was created for traditionally schooled and homeschooled children. If you use our link underneath this podcast, you can get a $20 credit towards your first class on the platform. That class or game does not have to be with me. It can be with any teacher you'd like. You can take anything from reading, arts, math, all the way up to astronomy, Dungeons and Dragons, and Minecraft games. The opportunities are limitless for your child to take classes on OutSchool. We have also linked the Fire Bunny Adventures Etsy page, where we offer handcrafted fantasy creatures, dice advent calendars, and handcrafted items for geeks and nerds everywhere.
So, for today's episode, we are going to be talking about, kung fu, martial arts, and, throwing people through walls Looney Tunes style. We are talking about the Bathar monks, quite literally the Shaolin monks of Chanel. However, what separates these guys is they, much like, traditional monks and traditional martial arts teachers, they generally denote wisdom through cryptic riddles, metaphors, and are most famous for their martial art expertise. They're also the ones who keep the balance of ki in check to make sure that no odd shenanigans happen, namely another blood moon or some massive demonic incursion. The temple where they reside, it's a massive, basically it's one big giant massive sanctuary, but the sanctuary itself is built on top of a massive key nexus, and they are the guardians of that nexus as well as the key of doors. It is hidden in the Bathar Mountains, but to get to the sanctuary, one has to trek through many hardships and dangers until they come to basically, quite literally, a fork in the road, if you will, with 4 paths.
So for our listeners out there who this is a new concept to you, ki or chi is the traditional way of measuring one's body energy. And legend has it that martial arts masters can use this inner power as in almost supernatural ways. They can run across water, they can parkour up mountainsides, they can kill people with a single blow. They could also use your own body's energy against you to, let's say, paralyze you or knock you unconscious. For those who are playing Dungeons & Dragons 5e, the new 2024 update for the Player's Handbook for Monk is now calling this, instead of key points, focus points.
I know Kung Fu. Show me. Sorry, I had to do the Matrix reference. So, usually there are 2 ways that people actually find out about the monks because they tend to keep to themselves. The first is that they are actively seeking enlightenment or a way to basically improve themselves because they've either lost something precious or they've lost a fight and were humiliated, but not for revenge. The other way is that a monk will come across you after, a humiliation, a cruel irony, or a tragic loss of some kind, nurse you back to health, and offer you a chance for redemption or improvement via a cryptic riddle and a seemingly impossible task. In order to get to the actual monastery, you have to pass through the Dexia Swamp, which is filled with some of the scariest, most deadly, and malevolent creatures in the universe. And it is also home to Shrek, of all people, because why the hell not? Shrek will tell you the safest route to the root of the mountain, but he will not actually go into the mountain, as he is mainly the protector of the Dexia swamp. The route that he tells you about is the actual route into the mountain. The route through the swamp is designed so that any invaders that are trying to get into the mountains will have to take that path, and they'll likely get cut down by the various man-eating swamp bogs and monsters. It is so treacherous and filled with so many dangers that even God himself, Morgan Freeman, cowers in fear. Yeah, and it is intended for that path is intended for invaders so as to protect the true path.
You just have Shrek as your guide, and he's just like, get out of my swamp! And he's just like, the easiest way to get you out of here is just put you on the path, throw you at the mountain, get going.
What are you
So
doing
if
in
you
my
seek,
swamp? Sorry.
what are you doing in my swamp? So if you seek the monks with revenge in your heart, how do they mask their presence from you?
Well, generally they're not like gonna be super secretive um about their origins or where they come from, because all Bathar monks have a tattoo that distinguishes them, and anybody who knows about the Bathar monks will recognize that tattoo. And also, most of them tend to speak in cryptic riddles, and there's only one organization that actually speaks in cryptic riddles.
Okay, so they're going to be pretty upfront that, hey, you're not here for pure purpose, but we're not going to hide from you. So a lot of monk organizations across the world are built on helping the fellow person, charity, things like this. What do the monks get out of helping heroes, helping the player characters? Do they earn fame for their monastery? Do they get donations or alms or food donations for helping these people?
Generally they get their most of their stuff actually from the city of Rune and the Western Conglomerate, but they will go out to villages and just kind of say, look at the situation, say, okay, well, we need to rebuild that wall or we need to rebuild this house, and they will do that, and they'll do it for almost nothing, even though people will literally say, here, take some of our food, take some of our money. We want to repay you. It's They often teach um monetary gain is fleeting, and it's also a a path to the dark side. Funny enough that I bring that up, but it's the it's they teach it the any kind of possession, no matter how small, does lead to a road that is not advisable to travel down. It's kind of like how we talked about in the Shadows episode, where once you start down it, eventually you'll come to the point of no return. In this case, it takes a lot longer for that effect to come in because you are in an enlightened state in a way. Um, so when you take the safe path into the mountain, you will come upon five paths at the fork, and a monk will be sitting there meditating, waiting, saying, I have been waiting for you." He will basically do effectively a Vulcan mind meld and examine you and determine which path you should take. And you would take the path he suggests, and you arrive at a temple and meet the sensei. Depending on which path you took determines your training regime and your master.
So it's almost like the sorting hat in Harry Potter. It's like, which house would you belong to? Now, coming up to this fork in the road, would a person know about the reputations of the masters? And like Harry Potter did say, hey, I want this master instead of that master. And would they take that into account?
Well, generally the Vulcan mind meld that they do, which is not technically a Vulcan mind meld, it's just kind of it's a psionic scan. But basically what it is it determines your character, it determines your situation, and also because the one who told you about the sanctuary will probably send word ahead, and and this monk will know everything about you and why you're seeking them out. Generally, it's a test of character, another Kobayashi Maru, if you will. Most of the reputation surrounding the Masters is somewhat known, but the origin of how they got that reputation is a closely guarded secret, unless the Master actually tells them the story of how they got their reputation. So,
I'm sure there's some rumors flying around that are wildly inaccurate about these masters that the people nearby might be spreading around just to have some peace and quiet in the villages.
Yeah. So each path has a separate temple, as I explained earlier, that is run by a different master. There's about 5, 6, 7 masters that teach various martial arts and disciplines in each of the schools, and there's one grandmaster that runs everything from the main dojo.
Could a person, uh, like, almost like going to college, you have more than one major at the same time. Could you train under two different masters, or are are the martial arts styles wildly different, and you can really only follow one master?
Well, you can learn under multiple masters, but that generally occurs when you've been actually been inducted into the temple as a new, a new, I believe it's called a new acolyte. But basically, if you want to learn under two masters, usually one master will sit in while the other is training you and kind of advise. Um, but it's not unheard of, but it is kind of it's a strange thing that generally doesn't happen very often unless it's a very specific circumstance. So let's we'll talk
All right.
let's
Wait.
talk let's talk about let's talk about the different disciplines, schools, and masters. So our first guy, he teaches the path of the coiled palm, and this is led by Master Pai Mei. If you know your Kill Bill, you'll know who this guy is. He was actually the actor who plays Pai Mei. Actually, did play Pai Mei in another film. I don't remember which one, but it was a very. Let's just say this guy is very old. Um, he is a legend among the sanctuary, and he is known for his seemingly cruel and harsh training regime. In reality, he created this rumor specifically so that only those who were truly determined would seek to study under him. He has quite mellowed, but his training is designed for one thing and one thing only: absolute death. He sees negative emotions as weapons to be used against an opponent, so that's why he likes to taunt opponents or taunt his students to kind of get them riled up. Kind of like a psychological warfare, if you will. And he enjoys doing that and provoking an attack only to twist their arm to a point that it feels like it's been chopped off, but even though it hasn't. His lessons are designed to instill absolute discipline and mastery over one's strength to such a point where they can actually smash a log easily with one go. Though Paimon never actually uses a weapon beyond his walking stick, he does train his students in various bladed weapons, most namely the Naginata, Dao Sword, Spear, and the Sai. Of course, the thing that everybody knows him for is, plucking out eyes and the 5-point pump exploding heart technique, to which only one other person has been taught this technique. We'll talk about them later. Paimon has never actually plucked out a student's eye or do anything humiliating to a student as a punishment, save for his second student, to which, if anyone mentions it, is guaranteed to not end well. He will, let's just say, he'll give you a very vigorous look and he'll just kind of tilt his head and he'll scorn you for bringing it up. Unless you didn't know any better, then he'll kind of just still scorn you anyway.
There's a lot of palm and strike attacks that are throughout all of martial art movies, kung fu movies, manga, anime. Um, there's one in a really funny kung fu movie called Kung Fu Hustle, where they do an attack against a an elderly lady who's actually a hidden kung fu master, and they end up putting the shape of a hand into her apartment building because the attack is so powerful. It put this giant 20-foot tall handprint into the side of the building. Yep. And sounds like Pai Mei does the classic fighting technique of go for the eyes. People will flinch away when you head for their face. And then they drop the guard over or other more sensitive parts of their body, which you can then kick or strike as they're trying to turn their face away, which basically breaks their gaze off your attacks.
Exactly. That's kind of his thing. He's pretty good at that. A quote from the man himself. They say that pain is an excellent teacher. I laugh at that perception. Pain is useful only for the sadistic and the desperate. Learning to understand pain to overcome it, to make it your otium, is the most useful lesson of all. So our next person is a lady. Uh, she teaches the path of the tempered root. Uh, she is known as the Red Lotus, but most people know her as Lady Ishiku. She is a Runian swordmaster who has taken refuge in the mountains due to her home being burnt down years ago. A Kung Fu TV reference here that some people may not get is that the Shaolin Temple in Kung Fu: The Legends Continue was actually attacked by what they call a quote unquote evil force. Um, when her home was burnt down, this was the only time that she showed the briefest of emotional pain. The Grandmaster accepted her out of respect and because of her reputation, and he asked her in humility to teach her several forbidden techniques that she created. She agreed and provided a small demonstration, to which Pai Mei was actually watching at the time, and when he saw the techniques for himself, it was said that his contempt for women vanished in an instant, and he knew the greatest of humility. Lady Ishiku is the premier swordmaster, and her skill with the katana is matched by few and surpassed by fewer. But what she is known for are three techniques: the silent dragon strike, the flowing sim technique, and most dangerous of all, the 12-point paralyzing palm technique.
The whole something horrible happens and then the martial artist just stoically walks away is a very common theme in a lot of this. So for her, how often do students seek her out? I know they get set on a path, so we know Pai Mei rarely takes students. And what kind of person would end up at her training facility once they get set on the fivefold path?
Well, for the most part, if you are a you love your you're in love with blades and executing your technique properly, and you particularly love katanas, Lady Ishiku is the person for you. I should warn our viewers, Lady Ishiku hates elves, despises orcs, and has nothing for contempt but men. But yet, she has trained several male students despite this. It's kind of the opposite of Pai Mei, where Pai Mei has nothing but contempt for women, but in this case, it's for men. Um, how often they seek her out? I would say it's fairly common if you're one to learn the katana specifically, because she is the premier sword master, and even the shogun of, the daimyo of Rune respects her skill. So the Silent Dragon Strike is one of the deadliest moves in all of martial arts, more so possibly than the 5-point palm exploding heart technique. It literally takes your breath away before drop to the ground, not knowing what the hell happened. Quite simply, to put it in another way, the strike takes your ki energy and uses it to implode your body on a metaphysical level. And even Pai Mei himself is afraid of this strike.
It's almost if I know several people out there have had the wind knocked out of them when they've fallen suddenly. You strike your, what is it, the sternum of your chest and the wind gets knocked out of you. Luckily with that one, you get your breath back. How many people are able to master this silent dragon technique? Is it a hard one to take on, or is it all of her students are able to get it after a while?
After a while, it's the most common technique that's learned under Lady Ishiku. Unfortunately, it's very difficult to pull off because you have to strike at a very specific point on the body. But when you pull it off, it's very gratifying. But you're in some ways her technique and the way she teaches, it doesn't even it basically you feel like something else has taken a hold of you once you go into a fight. You're not even fighting yourself. It's like something else. You've kind of transformed in a way. if you will.
It sounds like it's almost, for those who've played the video game Mortal Kombat and all of its iterations, it sounds like the finishing move that they'll do at the end of the game or
Yeah,
end of the battle.
fatality. So the flowing seam technique is a paralyzing move that basically cuts off your body's ability to feel pain. And as the strike hits your nerves, you slump over, unable to think, unable to contemplate what has just happened. But all you know now is that you are at the mercy of Lady Ishiku, and pray to all the heavens that she is feeling merciful. Otherwise, she will snap your neck like a twig, and the worst part is you won't feel a thing.
So the whole key block, chi block, it's kind of like a Vulcan neck pinch. It kind of paralyzes different parts of the body. This move comes up a lot in Kung Fu martial arts culture, where the practitioner will strike at like your shoulder or a certain key point on your body, and then you can't use your arm, you can't use your leg, or you just completely pass out. If anybody's watched Naruto, this is used a lot in the anime. Pretty much every martial arts movie somewhere, someone's getting key blocked, and then they have to overcome the basically the inability to use their arm or their leg or their key powers. And after the last Airbender, they use key to use airbending, waterbending, firebending, earthbending, and there were several characters in that anime that could block your bending just by hitting a certain point in your body.
Actually, the character Ty Lee, she is a prominent person who uses key blocking techniques. It's funny because she's like the most like bubbly, cutesy character, and you would never think that she would be the kind of person to do that to you. And then when she does it to Sokka, he's just like, he keeps going until, she strikes his head, and he's like, ow. it's kind
I love his little noodle arms he gets when she blocks both
oh
his
god,
arms. They're just like dangling there.
it's hilarious.
Sokka's the best. I mean, he put up with these super powered individuals, and yet he became like a great fighter general himself. Even though he was surrounded by all these people with superpowers, he was also very exceptional as well.
Yeah, and also, Sokka teaching under that one master is also a best example to kind of describe Lady Ishiku in a way. Also, sneak attack, just sneak attack. That will always be um, my favorite thing about Sokka, and also the boomerang. Just the boomerang. I have no idea why, but the boomerang is kind of associated with Sokka, believe it or not.
And for those of you who are playing the Avatar role-playing game, there is on Fantasy Name Generator, it's a website where we come up with the names for our NPCs, our monsters, all that stuff. There is a name generator on there for Sokka's based martial art moves because he always came up with these weird, crazy names for his boomerang strikes and things like that. So there's a name generator now where you can come up with your own Sokka moves and use them on your opponents.
So I'm about to tell the tale of the Red Lotus, and I actually have my ocarina. So pardon my bad playing of my ocarina here. So once upon a time, some estimate around the year 2005 of the Third Era, Shogun Ishiku was traveling along the road. Her reputation was well known among the lands, respected by many, feared by all. She comes across a Charian, an elf, and an orc. For whatever confounded reason in the universe, Master Ishiku bowed to all three of them. Only two returned the bow. The Charian, being prideful, asked why the elf and the orc were bowing. They responded with this woman was the legendary Shogun Ishiku, and that anyone who crossed her path was to bow, even if she does not return the bow. The Charian made the mistake of saying something rather not pleasant, and ended up one less eye. The elf and the orc begged Lady Ishiku not to kill them, and that their colleague didn't understand. Lady Ishiku spared them, but said she was traveling to Char in search of a friend. The elf and the orc offered to take her there. She accepted, but said to leave the Charian writhing on the ground. She walks into town to the barracks of the Charian 285th Second Company, the best infantry unit Char has. She goes to the general and demands that he release her friend, to which they have unjustly imprisoned. And if they did that, they would not suffer the wrath of the Red Lotus. The captain simply laughed at her demand and said that unless she planned to walk into town with an army and deliver the demand again, they would never release her friend. Lady Ishiku said she would return the next day and offer mercy. She does so, and offers the soldiers an ultimatum. Release her friend and be spared the fury of the Red Lotus. The general did not accept this offer. And so began the massacre of Barracks 382 and all 150 of the Charian soldiers. The Charian general was the first to fall. Lady Ishiku plucked out both his eyes and delivered the silent dragon strike to his captain. Then she turned to the sergeant and delivered the ultimate humiliation. And so began the legend of Lady Ishiku's 12-point paralyzing palm technique.
It sounds like the elf and the orc got the memo that she really doesn't like the races and that they better be respectful or bad things will happen. Both those races tend to have long memories, and orcs are very much a strength-based society. I'm not sure about this world, but the stronger somebody is, the more in charge they are.
Big orc know best. So you may ask, what is the 12-point paralyzing palm technique? Well, quite simply, it is the most humiliating move to be hit by in martial arts. She hits you at 12 points on your body with her fingertips. Your body becomes fully joint locked. The only things that move are your eyes and obviously your heart and your mouth. And the only way to be released is to either perform the counter technique or to wait out the 12 hours until your body naturally frees itself. Of course, very few know about the move, much less the proper counter technique. And on that day, all 150 members of the 285th Second Company were humbled by the cynical cruelty of Lady Ishiku and learned a valuable lesson. Lady Ishiku hates elves, despises orcs, and has nothing but contempt for men. And yet she has taught many students despite this.
So you mentioned that this technique needs a counter technique. Who would be trained in this counter technique?
Nobody knows the counter technique. The only person who actually knows it is Lady Ishiku herself. And she has only taught a handful of students this technique. She barely teaches it.
Very smart. She has the lock, but she is the only keeper of the key.
Yeah.
So the question is, does anyone on the Char side have their own set of highly powered martial artists that could counter these masters in some way?
No, the Charians aren't stupid enough to try anything against these martial masters. If they did, let's just say that Lady Ishiku would walk into town and massacre all the soldiers. Let's just say that.
Got it.
So,
got it. So,
next up is the Path of the Silent River. The master there is none other than Master Splinter himself. No turtles, unfortunately. Master Splinter is quite possibly the nicest of all the masters because of the love he has for his sons that actually went on to become masters themselves. He is the master of ninjutsu, but his specialty is teaching someone how to truly disappear. As someone once said, I can avoid being seen if I wish, but to disappear entirely, that is a rare gift. If you want to learn how to infiltrate impenetrable places, obtain intelligence, and leave without anybody knowing you are there, Splinter is the person you learn that from. His weapon specialty is the classic ninjutsu weapons, the nunchuck, the shoto blade, the not the one that is on your back. That's actually a Hollywood invention, and also the quarterstaff, the sai, that kind of thing. But he prioritizes adaptability and the insight to turn almost anything into a deadly weapon. Think of it like the martial arts equivalent of MacGyver, if you will.
And you'll see in a lot of martial arts movies references that they're not reliant on their weapons. They are very much trained that anything could be a weapon around you, a rock, a stick, the sand, things like that.
An exploding
Um,
sandwich.
I, I must say, yes, exploding sandwich. Many, many moons ago, way back when, I was absolutely obsessed with the Ninja Turtle comics. This was back when there was no cartoon yet. There was no movie yet. It was in black and white. The only way you could tell the turtles apart was basically what weapon they were carrying in the cartoon. And even then it was kind of a mix-up because everyone had the black eye masks on, and it was black and white comics, so there was no color references. So out of the two, who do you think would be best at giving good advice to a student of the master? Would it be Uncle Iroh or Splinter?
I would say it'd definitely be Uncle Iroh. Although Splinter does have his moments where he goes father mode, it's very few and far between because he's not stoic and he's not stuck up, but he has his way of doing things, and although he's proud of his sons, he kind of misses them and he kind of wishes he could see them again, but he does what he has to, where he wants to teach the next generation of Ninja Turtles, if you will. Fun fact about those comics: originally Raphael used Tonfa instead of Sai. It was only the cartoon that updated his weapons. And in Rise of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, he goes back to the Tonfa. The other funny thing is that later on in the original '86 cartoon, Michelangelo's nunchucks were replaced with um, something called, I believe it was called a kusar. It's not a kusarigama. Sorry, it's basically something attached to the end of a rope, and it was referred to as a grappling hook. No idea why they did this. I think it was because at the time they didn't want they the networks said, "Oh, nunchucks are dangerous to kids, and we don't want kids getting hurt." So they basically said, "No nunchucks for Michelangelo going forward." Until much later, and then the 2003 cartoon upgraded their weapons further, where they actually got upgraded versions of their original weapons, and they're also trained in other various weapon types. For example, there's one episode where they go up against I would say a chameleon robot that can basically mimic their fighting styles. So basically, they trade weapons. And in the 2012 version, they actually they have to learn how to fight with each other's weapons. Namely, um, well, Mikey is clearly the unsafe one, where he's spinning Leo's swords, which is just absolutely dangerous. And fun fact about that: of all four Ninja Turtles, Michelangelo is said to be the most skilled. And in the last Ronin comic, it turns out the survivor of everything was Michelangelo, which is crazy to think about because what's the first thing we think about with Michelangelo?
He's the goofball.
Exactly, and he always shouts out "Cowabunga," which is funny that that turned into surfer slang, which is hilarious. And also, I realized that I didn't know this until much later, but the guy who voices Shredder in the original '86 comic, that's I forget his. I think his name's Uncle Phil. I think he's from Fresh. I think he's from Fresh
Fresh
Prince.
Prince of Bel-Air, yeah.
That's what I thought. Yeah, it's like so the ultimately the main villain of this of the show is basically the uncle of Will Smith, which we're not going to bring it up here. Also, there's the movie that actually is very close to the actual original comic. I love that movie. That movie pretty much sold me on Ninja Turtles because it's just so good, even though it can get a little wonky at times. I freely admit, though, um, like Shredder in that movie looks a lot like Darth Vader. I have no idea why, but he does. But it's just It's just a lot of fun. It's a really good movie. It still holds up funny enough, which is the crazy part.
They wanted to go classic brooding villain with the face mask and the spikes. Back to the thing about the changing up the nunchucks to the grappling hook. What was happening at that time period is kids were very creative. They were making their own homemade nunchucks with dowel rods and rope, and then they would go out backyard pretending to be a Ninja Turtle, and then they would boink themselves in the head with the stick, and then the parents would get upset that this cartoon was influencing their children to be dangerous. So the cartoon execs changed it up. A lot of monk weapons, at least in Japan, sometimes in China too, are based on peasants' farming tools. Like the most simplest weapon in the world is just a stick. So that becomes your quarterstaff, that becomes your bow staff. Nunchucks are the flails that you would use to get the rice grains off the rice stems. So that's two sticks attached with a chain or a piece of rope. So your average kid, there's plenty of sticks in the neighborhood. There's plenty of rope in the neighborhood. So they were, making their own stuff and trying to practice with it. So the cartoon creators had to put like one of those warning labels on that, hey, please don't try this at home.
Also, funny enough, do you think Michelangelo was influenced by Bruce Lee?
I don't think so. I would think more it would be Leonardo would have been because he's the more serious one. I know Jackie Chan movies didn't come in till a lot later. I would say Michelangelo would be more based on Jackie Chan's more silly roles where he's doing the comedy kung fu.
All right, so let's move on.
He was always the comedian of the group.
So let's move on. So
Okay.
next up, we have the Path of the Horned Panda. Now, sadly, no Kung Fu Panda reference here. Although you could argue Po could theoretically be a master here, but he isn't. This is the Key Mastery School, or Focus Point School, if you will. The sensei here are Master Donnie Yen and Mr. Miyagi. Master Yen.
Yeah, wax on, wax off.
Yes, very much so. Master Yen teaches enlightenment through mastery of your key energy, and also how to fold people in half like paper. Now, talking about key energy for a second here. Key energy resides in all beings, but only those who can perceive the infinite possibilities can manipulate it, harness it, and focus it. Master Yen teaches you how to do all kinds of crazy stuff with ki, but to use it in a practical manner. And to answer the most obvious question, yes, ki is kind of basically the force, but it also exists on a metaphysical level. Now, Mr. Miyagi teaches Miyagi-Do, obviously, how to basically improve yourself on a psychological as well as in some ways, physical level. He is absolutely cryptic as hell about his lessons, but the lessons are meant to instill discipline and repetition through indirection. For example, paint the fence, sand the floor, wax on, wax off. These are basically repetition drills. Miyagi-san is the only one who he's actually the one who pretty much takes pity on a person almost all the time who has been through a humiliating defeat. He will recite a cryptic saying and tell the person about the sanctuary, and if they wish to become better, then he'll tell them that they have to journey through the swamp up to the pass.
He kind of goes out as the recruiter and finds somewhat worthy candidates to come to training.
So yeah, to quote Mr. Miyagi himself, ki is not a power one simply controls. It is a manifestation of wisdom and understanding focused through the body. It transforms the hands and senses when fighting, allowing one to strike harder and react quicker, to such a point that to an outside viewer, they don't seem to move at all. It enhances the feet when running, allowing for a longer and more measured stride that covers ground more than an Olympic runner. Kind of like basically the Naruto run that has actually been scientifically proven, believe it or not. Master Yen is actually physically blind. The reason for this is due to a certain kitchen utensil, the man named Oroku Saki taking out his anger on the temple, and he just happened to get caught in the crossfire, unfortunately. Now, finally, we have the Grand Master of the temple, who teaches the way of the prismatic puffin. Don't worry, it's not as ridiculous as it sounds.
I love the name.
Yeah. Actually, fun fact about puffins, they're actually closely related to penguins, believe it or not. In a way, they kind of look like penguins with colored beaks. Now you may be wondering, who is the Grand Master that even Pai Mei himself respects? Well, it is in fact the man himself, Bruce Lee. A couple of fun facts about Bruce Lee. When he was actually punching or kicking, he moved so fast that they had to speed up the camera in order to capture him at regular speed. The man is a philosopher. He is the only person on film that actually has beaten Chuck Norris. There is, I believe it's Path of the Dragon, where he fought Chuck Norris and won. It was actually Lee who proposed the idea for the Kung Fu TV series, and Lee was actually going to be the lead role until his death. And so the producers signed on David Carradine, who is the villain from Kill Bill. So the way that the prismatic puffin teaches martial arts through distraction, diversion, and division. Lee is the premier exotic weapons instructor and is the only person who has beaten Pai Mei in a match, or so the legend goes. Master Lee does not teach martial arts for the sake of vengeance or revenge, but to improve one's own ability. He believes that one's skill comes from experience and hard work, as well as the acceptance that when you study under him or any of the masters, you are basically training yourself on how to take a life in self-defense and only as a last resort. And that first life you take with the skills you have learned will stick with you.
So, growing up where I did, we didn't have cable growing up because that was expensive. But every Saturday morning, you'd get your classic cartoons, and then by the afternoon, the TV stations would play these like B, C, D level movies. And a lot of times it was the original Godzilla or Enter the Dragon or all these different kung fu movies that came out in the 80s. Um, so you got to see a lot of kung fu with Bruce Lee and other martial arts legends. It kind of grew into a love of modern martial arts films now, where they're using special effects, they're using wire work to show off some of the more supernatural martial arts tricks that Ki or Chi can produce. I would have loved to see a movie, I know it's never going to happen, maybe with AI, where Bruce Lee, Chuck Norris, and Jackie Chan are all the main characters, and they're just fighting and interacting with each other. That would have been epic.
Oh, and before anybody asks, I will do my Bruce Lee impression. I apologize in advance. Boards don't hit back. I do that a little too well. So, you remember that bit I was telling you about how Pai Mei has never plucked out a student's eye?
Except for that one situation. Yes, let's get into that.
Yeah, so that story was created by the student out of fear. But what actually happened was that when Splinter was chosen as one of the sensei, Oroku Saki, as everybody knows, who would eventually become a kitchen utensil, was jealous beyond belief, and he was a student under Pai Mei for some time, and asked him to actually teach the exploding palm technique. However, Pai Mei, in his near infinite wisdom, saw Saki's heart and said no, and Saki called him a miserable old fool, and Pai Mei gave him the facial scars that he would carry for the rest of his life. Saki was expelled, but not before killing many students, blinding Master Yen, and then he fled to Char, and he eventually would rise up and become the Shredder. So
Char kind of has somebody that knows a few of the master's techniques, but not enough to be effective against them.
Basically, yeah. So the Bathar Sanctuary complex itself, it sits on a massive nexus of ki energy. The nexus itself is both a portal and a well of pure unrestricted metaphysical energy, commonly as we refer to it as ki. The portal transports the user to the realm of the dragons, although only the Grandmaster can actually open the gateway. And if a mortal tries to use the gateway without the proper incantation, it opens the door to one of the other realms that is less than friendly towards mortal kind, namely the Shadow Realm, the plane of fire, that kind of thing.
So in this world it could be a combo. Is ki created by magic? Is it created by the person's natural body, or is it a little bit of both?
It's a little bit of both. It's created, as Obi-Wan said, it's an energy field created by all living things. It surrounds us, it penetrates us, it binds the galaxy together like galactic superglue.
Okay, so it's kind of like the Force from Star Wars.
It is very much the Force, yes. In fact, most of the martial arts was taken not for, well, most of the sword fighting from Star Wars is based on Japanese sword fighting, but there are elements of um other martial arts in there too. Namely the unarmed techniques that we see in, like, for example, Star Wars: The Clone Wars, or when they employ like kicks and all that. Now, granted, it's very few and far between because it's kind of hard to kick a droid, but it's still noticeable. Anyway, so before we wrap up, let's go through a couple of movies that we would recommend for anybody who actually wants to try out and look into like the martial arts genre as a whole. Um, what would be your big one, in your opinion?
So I have a lot that are all at the top tier. All my recommendations today are if you really want to get into the genre, any of these would be a good entry point. I even have a kid-friendly version. The first movie I ever saw back when they were showing those B movies on TV was Enter the Dragon with Bruce Lee. We liked it so much that, oh, I'm so old. When VCRs first came out, we actually bought the VHS movie so we could watch it more than once.
I actually
So
have the
that is an
DVD.
excellent intro.
I actually have the DVD, and
DVD now, but back then.
God, I feel old. I still have VCRs. The funny thing is that um Bruce Lee in that film takes on the role of a Shaolin monk, though he doesn't have the orange tunic. It's more of it's kind of like a light bluish tunic, but he still takes on that role and I really like how, like, when he goes into the complex, he starts off with his bare hands and he gets a stick, and then he gets metal rods, and then he eventually upgrades to nunchucks. And Bruce Lee has kind of become the main guy for nunchucks, besides, Michelangelo and all that. And, like, if you watch him go, like, when he does all the flourishes, it's like, look at him go. Like, he's that good. And when I was talking about how, like, he would punch so fast that they had to speed up the camera, there's a bit where he faces off against O'Hara, the other guy. It's so fast you barely catch it. He was that fast. And yeah, also, when Chuck Norris goes to bed, looks under the bed for Bruce Lee.
Bruce Lee's the only person that can defeat Chuck Norris.
Yes, he has
And Chuck
defeated Chuck
Norris
Norris.
accepts it.
Yeah. Karate Kid.
Norris accepts it.
Karate Kid. Karate Kid is another one. It's Miyagi-Do and Mr. Miyagi, and that was the film that actually introduced me to martial arts, besides Power Rangers, but it was also the one that kind of said, hey, martial arts is not for everybody, but it's also there as, it's kind of, Mr. Miyagi, I think he taught Daniel's son Miyagi-Do because he was getting picked on. He said, enough's enough. I want you to learn this. And eventually, he goes on to win the tournament, and he goes on to become a master himself. And Cobra Kai is really good. Like, seriously, if you have Netflix or can find it, watch Cobra Kai, because it's that good. I would argue it's on the same level as the first Karate Kid. Now, I have not seen the second or third Karate Kid, so I don't know. And when it comes to the reboot, I'm kind of mixed on it, to be honest. I don't mind Jackie Chan as the mentor, even though he's supposed to be playing Mr. Miyagi. I just prefer the original. The original will always be the best.
The original is very classic. It got a lot of kids to start taking martial arts classes when that movie came out. And to this day, in your town, you can probably find 4 to 5 to 6 martial arts studios that take in school-age students that it wouldn't be there if the Karate Kid hadn't come out when it had and started this renaissance of, hey, there's this cool new sport. Let's go try it. And it's always been billed as it's for self-defense. If you're getting bullied, you need to do this because you can defend yourself, but still be the nice person you want to be. So it really launched a whole sport that kids had never heard of back in the day.
Also, Mr. Miyagi.
Another great. Okay, go ahead.
Sorry. Another thing that I really like about Karate Kid is Mr. Miyagi's backstory is really tragic. Now that I think about it, because it the movie takes place in the 70s, if I'm not mistaken, and it was after, and Mr. Miyagi actually fought in World War II against, I believe he was in the U.S. Army, but he ended up losing his wife, and he ended up being in a internment camp, which was what the U.S. did to all Japanese American citizens. But it's very tragic, but it really gives you insight into like why Mr. Miyagi is the way he is, but he has his fun moments. He has his like whimsical moments, like when he's like rocking the boat while Daniel's son is practicing and he's just there fishing. It's like, oh god, I love Mr. Miyagi so much. If I were to pick a martial arts master, he would be like my master probably.
I call him the Roomba martial arts master because he got Danielson to do all of his house chores. And they said, oh, by the way, this is martial arts training. But hey, go dust my fridge. Go wax my car. Go paint my fence.
I think
And
those.
finally,
Oh,
Daniel is like, why am I doing all these chores? And he's like, oh, I'm teaching you martial arts. But Daniel's like, but it took him like weeks to ask, like, why am I doing all these chores? So,
and
Daniel was fun, but sometimes you wonder, he wasn't smart enough to ask questions in the beginning.
I see it as like it's repetition drills, which are basically doing the same thing over and over, and it's to basically work that into your muscles so that it becomes second nature. It's I love that because, and also, he also teaches the whole thing about bowing is that you look at your opponent when you bow. You don't bow your head all the way. That's kind of a misconception about Japan and all that. But in martial arts, you should be looking at your enemy when you bow. It's more of a respect thing. Another great film, Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. I've never seen that movie, but I heard a lot of great things about it.
I have seen that one. It is really good. They did a lot of practical effects in the CGI, so it holds up really good to watch even to this day. It's sometimes martial arts movies will have like a love story mixed in. This one does. It's not overly sappy. It's a very sweet love story, but there's still a lot of fighting and butt kicking and sword fighting, and it's action, it's adventure, and there's a love story. So it kind of hits all of the boxes. It's a good date night movie. So you've got your action, you've got your adventure, and then you got your sweet romance.
Yeah. Kung Fu Hustle, as you were talking about, that's the one with Jackie Chan, correct?
No, this one it wasn't actually made for the American audience. It is a spoof of kung fu movies, but they filmed it in such a way that the actors are taking it seriously like it's an actual kung fu movie. So they're making fun of the different tropes. It starts out that there's these two characters. They are not the brightest crayons in the box. They try to hustle a landlady for her rent money, and she and her husband are these famous martial arts masters, kind of like your lady Pai Mei. It's kind of would be like Pai Mei and lady Izaku
Ishiku.
together got married. Ishiku got married and they retired and now they're landlords of an apartment building. And all of these evil kung fu fighters show up and these two just take them on by themselves, and it is very funny. It is an excellent movie. They went on to make other sequels in the same vein. Shaolin Soccer's one of them. Enjoyable movie. Don't take it seriously. It's there for fun. Um, Another fun movie that is kid safe, because a lot of these kung fu movies are gratuitous violence and blood everywhere. Kung Fu Panda. Jack Black plays the panda. He's very funny. They actually get into different types of martial arts. I remember watching this with my older brother, and he's like, "What's a sifu? What's sifu?" And I'm in my teacher brain. I'm going, "Oh, Sifu's a martial arts master." He's like, "No, what species is he?" Because they're all animals. I'm like, "Oh, he's a red panda." So it's a great movie for kids. And it really does get into different martial arts moves and styles of martial art. You have your tiger style, your snake style, your praying mantis style.
Actually, I believe Jackie Chan actually voices Monkey in Kung Fu Panda. I could be wrong about that, but um, it is a very good movie. Like, it also takes advantage of the underdog trope where Po is, he's a panda. He's big, but then once he gets the discipline, he actually starts to lose a little bit of weight. But he uses his girth, if you will, to his advantage. You're just a big, fat panda. I'm not a big fat panda. I'm the big fat panda. Oh man.
And playing on the Mr. Miyagi trope, Sifu trains Po by holding bowls of food just out of his reach. So it's the whole doing chores to learn your martial arts trope.
That scene where he's like they're dueling for the one dumpling is just it's absolutely hilarious how much fun they had with that particular scene. And then Poe's like, I'm not hungry. I was like, wait, what? You fought him for the last dumpling and you're not hungry. It's like, what was the whole point of that?
To battle for battle's sake. I also recommend anything Jackie Chan is in. He has a whole gamut. If you like comedy, he does that. If you like serious, he does that. If you like a mix of the two, he does that. Some of his movies have been made for the Chinese audience, and some of his movies have been made for American audiences. There's a couple where he's done it with like comedian Chris Rock, things like that. He does all of his own stunts, and at the end of the movie, they will tell you how many injuries he sustained during filming.
Yeah, this guy is like the Tom Cruise of Asia, if you will. He does his own stunts and he's actually injured himself a bunch of times. Jackie Chan is pretty much like, if you want like a serious film, Jackie Chan is not for you. Um, yeah. Okay. Now, Drunken Master. Heard a lot of great things about this movie, and it's actually a Jackie Chan movie, and it's actually it takes advantage of the whole Drunken Master style and plays on that idea. I believe Jackie Chan plays the actual Drunken Master. I could be wrong, but it is a lot of fun, and this one in particular is just a lot of fun. Don't check your expectations at the door.
This is where Drunken Master style came from. The whole idea that the person can't fight unless they're drunk, and once they're drunk, they're a master at kung fu. If they're sober, they can't fight at all. They have no fighting skills.
So a couple more before we actually wrap up. Ip Man, the first Ip Man. Donnie. Fun fact: Donnie Yen paid $1,000 to the stunt actors during that 10v1 scene to actually let him actually hit them. And the movie is based on the some semi-true story of the man that actually trained Bruce Lee, Ip Man himself, which was a. And when I first saw the scene where he fights 10 guys and basically folds them like tissue paper, I was like, oh my god. And Donnie Yen is just, he's done so much for the martial arts world that it would be impossible not to find a film with him in it. Like, he's been in Blade 2, he was in Rogue One, he was in he played Ip Man. For Rogue One, he essentially played a blind monk, and it was really interesting to see like how well he doesn't seem to be a Jedi. He does seemingly have the Force, or he can touch the Force, if you will.
I think they explained him as force sensitive, where he can't like access the powers, but somehow he was sensing them.
The way the Force actually works is that if you are Force sensitive, you can actually touch the Force. It depends on your Force sensitivity, like the whole midi chlorians thing, which I'd rather not talk about because that's a whole another can of worms.
Let's not go into midichlorians. That was a mistake.
Actually, actually, it does explain a great many things, but it is kind of poorly explained. Anyway, the Kung Fu TV series that starred David Carradine and Kung Fu: The Legends Continue. That whole thing basically introduced the idea of a Shaolin monk into Western society in a TV form. And David Carradine is such a cool character because in the intro of The Legend to Continue, he actually catches a knife that's being thrown at his face, and it turns out he has a son, and it's interesting to see like how like applying like Shaolin Kung Fu into a Western world, and how people and how onlookers look at that and they're like, wow, that's awesome, because most of the time Western society would be teaching something like jujitsu, karate, Krav Maga, or Muay Thai, but Kung Fu is so obscure that it's rare to find an actual master. The closest thing that you could find is somebody who is a master of wushu.
Good news is, thanks to the internet, we can find anything we want now.
Thank goodness. Now, another David Carradine film is Kill Bill Volume 1 and 2. Now, these two films specifically explore more, they're focused more on the sword fights rather than the hand-to-hand fights. The hand-to-hand fights are kind of brutal, but this is also where we learn about Pai Mei and all that crazy stuff. David Carradine is the villain. But fair warning if you are in the younger age, because this is a Tarantino film, Tarantino is well known for excessive gore, excessive language, and all that, and adult themes when making his films. So make sure you are mature enough, or at least have an adult with you when you watch them.
It's one of those directors who buys the fake blood by the barrel, not the gallon.
Yeah. And then finally, just to round things off, The Matrix. Keanu Reeves knows Kung Fu. Enough said.
And then I have one more kid-friendly option. There's a lot of animes out there, Naruto, but the one that became really popular, it's not an anime. It was not animated in Japan. Avatar: The Last Airbender. Each of the four nations is based on a different type of martial arts. The Water Nation is based on Tai Chi. Earth Nation is based on Hung Gar, which is a southern Chinese martial arts. The Fire Nation is Shaolin Kung Fu and Southern style Kung Fu. And the Air Nation is Bonga, which is, I hope I'm saying that right, Baguna, which is a spinning circle style with a lot of sweeping movements. There are a lot of good animes out there that are Kung Fu based, and martial arts based. I don't have them all in a list right now. Again, watch those if you're under the age of, let's say, 16. Make sure you have parent permission to see some of these, because some of them are gory, some of them are very bloody. Some of those are made for adults to watch, not kids.
Exactly. And also,
Because it's a cartoon.
yeah. Yeah, and also
Because it's a cartoon does not mean it's made for children.
although I would recommend some of the Bruce Lee films, because there is actually one where like he like knocks a guy through a wall, Looney Tunes style. It's pretty hilarious, and it shows that martial arts can be whimsical. Although he does chuck a bunch of ice picks into guys, so check your expectations at the door. Anyway, that's it for the episode. So what are your final thoughts on the Bathar Monks before we actually officially wrap up?
It sounds like a very interesting organization. I would love to see them in operation in the almost like the politics of the region that they're set in. and how they interact with their neighbors and how their neighbors think about them. I would like to ask our listeners to comment in the comments section your favorite martial arts movies, books, videos. Um, have you tried martial arts? What kinds have you practiced, tried? What's your favorite? Kind of, let us know in the comments. And also, what else are you interested in knowing about this world?
Next time on Dragonus Podcastus, we talk about the well, it depends on the episode, but we might be talking about the new Dungeon Master Guide, or we'll be talking about basically my version of Anakin Skywalker. Don't worry, there's no sand involved. Maybe, possibly.
And
I,
and,
I
and with
like
the
to.
Dungeon Master guides, there is a there is a lot of fun stuff coming out for people who have never been a DM before, and for DMs who have been doing this for years and years and years. There's a lot of fun stuff in there. So depending on which way we go, it will be fun and entertaining.
Yeah. All right. So we'll see you guys next time.